Hey everybody, it's Chris over Dixieland Farm, and today I'm going to be talking about the P4 rating that I went for on VATSIM, training with the VATSTAR people. So VATSIM is an online multiplayer network. It's with aviation enthusiasts. There are a camp of two people, the controllers and the pilots. Follow real world procedures. A lot of the people are actually real world pilots and real world controllers. They do it for practice to keep current. They enjoy the hobby, and so um, it's taken fairly seriously. Not a lot of goofing off. So uh, I had gone through the trainings, and the VAT sim trainings are modeled after real life. So P1 is your visual flight rules. You're like your private pilot's license. The P2 is your instrument rating, and I'd already accomplished all of that. And there were some internal changes to the ratings, but I had basically accomplished that. And then there was the P3 rating, which I've done a video on, which is the multi-engine airplane and failures and going through those things. And then there was the P4 rating, the airline transport pilot rating. Um, Interestingly enough, most people on VATSIM actually start with airliners and they work their way backwards to the general aviation, unlike real life where you would start on small planes and then eventually work your way up. I was actually most interested in general aviation. I do like flying twin engine airplanes. I've got my whole setup here to do that, and that is my general interest. But I passed the P3 and there was only one rating left to accomplish. To put it in perspective, online on VATSIM, there are about 700,000 people that are registered on the network. Uh, and a few thousand have the P1 rating and P2 rating. And then roughly 700 people have the P3 rating and the P4 rating at this time in 2021. My instructor said most of the people in those ratings are actually just real world pilots and they just transferred it over. They didn't actually go through the training and Checkride that you do online. So we're talking more like most likely 70 to 100 people actually have gone through the ratings on P4, and I am now one of them. So yeah, kind of a unique club to be in. And as you work your way up, the P4 really focuses on do you know the airplane and the systems. And so since I had passed my P3, like, well, this is the P4. Let me just at least do the written, right? Let me read the material, just pass the written. That way I knew. And once I passed the written, I'm like, well, you've already gone this far. So I needed to find a certain airplane that would fit the requirements, and I decided to pick the Dash 8. Now, back when I picked the Dash 8, it was a couple of reasons. One, it's a turboprop airplane, so they're kind of unusual. The systems made sense to me, how the whole thing works together. So that was a reason. The plane was $20 at the time. So the designer of this airplane made this airplane many years ago. I think almost 10 years ago, back when it was X-Plane 9, a long time ago. And he's updated it and then he kind of gave up because he's been working on a new version, the Q4XP. Um, so planes models got a little quirkiness to it. The Dash 8 has a little quirkiness to it. If we take a look at the plane real quick here, this is not where we are. We're in a replay mode, by the way, so we're going to be watching a replay. I did not record my test because I didn't want anything to affect the test. I didn't want the recording software to at all interfere with any kind of flight dynamic. So all we do is have a replay that's built into X-Plane, so we'll just be narrating it. So here it is, the Dash 8 turboprop. So the only difference between a turboprop and a turbojet is there's a big fan on the outside opposed to a big fan on the inside. There's still a jet engine, and it holds roughly 80 people. You can see it's extremely elongated. So the high wing. So one of the interesting things is it doesn't get into ground effect very easily, which is sort of like the wings kind of make a cushion of air that slow down. So unlike most planes, you use full power the whole way down into your landing, and because it's elongated, the plane used to start much smaller, and they just kept building and building and building and building it. Uh, there isn't much of a flare when you touch down, so that's got some peculiarities. The whole plane is just actually a peculiar plane. One of the things that endears me to it, it is very fuel efficient. It is very fast for turboprops, almost as fast as a jet. It can land in very short runways because of sort of the way it's designed and take off pretty quickly. So it's used a lot in very small airports, mostly in Canada. It is a Canadian plane. It was used in Europe and Africa. It's still used in Africa from what I understand, but Europe it kind of got phased out and wasn't really, turboprops aren't really uh, used very often in America. Um, so yeah, everything I just discussed about the plane and the kind of the history of the plane, that was a lot of the test, to be honest with you. We spent a lot of time discussing the inside of the plane and its systems here. So, I explained to him, well, how do you turn it on? What the ice system is? How does the pressurization work? What are the packs used for? The interesting thing about this plane is a lot of planes require bleed air. They require like an air compressor to get the engine started. The Dash does not. The engine is electrically started and then turns into the generator. So that's a unique thing. I knew that fact, and I got to say that to my instructor. And like I said, a lot of time was spent just talking about the plane and its weirdness, and I explained the different issues with the model. And one of the things that helped me out was I've got a video sort of right here that I'm going to play real quick. There we go. Turn down the volume. So this is a video series called Airline to Sim that just happened to be talking about the Q400. It was a real world Q400 pilot, and it was a video series in the simulator going through all the different things that are very unique to the Dash and how to fly certain things in the Dash and things, real world procedures that their company would do, because each airline might do something slightly different, and to explain why they would do it that way. So since I had watched that video series, I knew quite a bit about the Dash. Again, that was a lot of the test. Really understanding the airplane. So I'm going to let some of the replay mode go here. So here we go in my pushback here of the airplane, and this is when I start to get the engines running. There goes engine number 2. During my pushback here, we don't see the tug in the replay for whatever reason. But as you can tell from the weather, it was a foggy time, and that was part of the test. So we take off. We spent a lot of time pre-planning a route up to Seattle, and at some point we decide to come back and do an RNAV procedure. And with the RNAV procedure, which is GPS or other things, it's not just GPS RNAV. That's a misconception most people have, but we use the RNAV procedure, which has a higher minimum to land. We decide to go missed, and then after that we come back around for an ILS approach, which is a more accurate um, approach, which has a lower minimum, and we're able to land. So you can see here we are in Portland, and we are taxiing. And here we go. We line up onto the runway. So here we are back in the cockpit, and as I'm taking off, I just turned on the autopilot here, I can see, and I'm sure I'll be reducing my prop speed very shortly. And we break through the clouds, and here we go up and onto the route. So at some point here, we are going to break off from the flight up to Seattle, and we're going to come around and do the RNAV. Now, I did have a couple of issues with this plane and the vectoring that was happening at the time. So part of it was just through testing whatever issues we were having, and also with the plane model itself. Like I said, this plane is kind of old, and sometimes it doesn't do things that we expect. It's normally not a problem, but on rigors of this kind of test, we had a little issue. So if we pull up my map of the path that we're doing, you can see a couple of times we go around and circle a couple of times. We also have a holding pattern over here by BTG on the plane. But let's go ahead and get to the missed portion so you can see what at least that sort of looks like. Here we decide to go ahead and go around because we could barely see the runway. You could have almost seen it just off the side there, but we weren't quite there yet. So we go ahead and do the procedure, which is to fly straight ahead and then um, don't listen to any of that stuff in the background. That's also part of the replay issues with the model. So we go ahead and follow the procedure of climbing to 800 and then to the left to get ourselves into a safe hold so that way we can uh, decide what to do. Also, I noticed at this point that the autopilot wasn't doing what I asked it to do, so I went ahead and disengaged the autopilot and flew it by hand, which I think impressed the instructor because at any point when the autopilot isn't doing what you said to do, you take control because you are the pilot in command. So that is exactly what I did. And here we are, reestablishing the autopilot under control, and we are now going into the hold as we expect. At this point, we go ahead for the ILS. We are on the ILS approach right now. I do not know why it is nighttime in the replay here, and I can't change the time. That is fine. We're going to just go with it, right? So we're just going to pretend that, yeah, that we could actually see everything, and it was daylight. But here we come in a nice night approach, and we are perfectly established. And oh, there we go. So I don't know. Again, something weird with the replay. And we're back into the clouds again, and that's why you can see the strobe light flashing like that. So here we go. Outside. So here we go. 800, 700, 600, 500. When do we break out of the clouds? The minimum decision height I can see here on the display is 300 feet. So we're going to be breaking out any second, I would hope. There it is. And we're all lined up. So I've taken control of the airplane, and here we go with my landing. Let's get rid of that scrub bar, and let's see how rough this landing is while I'm being tested. I would say that's actually a really good landing. So there we go. So here we are. So another part of the test is to do some steep turns, which is pretty boring to watch. It's just you're doing a fairly banked turn by hand, and you have to keep it within 50 feet, roughly, altitude, which on a fast airplane, not the easiest thing to do, and you have to roll out within 10 degrees. Also, not the easiest thing to do. I did fine. So, uh, last part of the test is we're going to be failing an engine and then hand flying it for a bit of time. Same basic rules. I think we have to keep within 10 degrees or so, maybe more, uh, and within the same rough altitude. So let's get to the exciting failure of the engine part. But like I said, a lot of the P4 test is not that. It's really knowing the aircraft systems and flying and managing the computer and autopilot. You're not really expected to hand fly most of this, unlike the P3. You are using the autopilot just like the real pilot would, letting the airplane fly because he's going to be the best pilot, and you are managing that uh, autopilot. And in several times during my test, the autopilot did not do what I expected it to do, and I took manual control. We fixed the problem, and then we got back in order. And that honestly really is a lot of managing one of these big planes, is managing it, not so much flying it. Of course, flying into some of it, but that is a lot of the test of P4 and what they're looking for, which I think is why I did so well, because the Dash 8 legacy version that I was using has some quirks. The plane has quirks anyway, but this model has some quirks as well. So let's get to the single engine part, the exciting part. All right, so here we are at takeoff, and then boom, we lose an engine, and you can see real wobbly. So I do my best to maintain control, and one of the things is getting the gear up. And in this model, you do have to get the flaps up. So we are not straight, but then this is when I start regaining my composure and getting the airplane under control, which is paramount. So here we are. I am now getting back on the heading. Got some warnings here. You can see the auto feather system is taken over, has feathered the prop, which means that it's no longer acting with so much drag. And yeah, so the now unexciting part is watching me fly in gray skies, so I have no visual references outside, and trying to hand fly this thing and keep it under control. So here I am at best rate of climb, which is roughly 160 uh, knots. And you can see I've got it fairly stabilized here now. So we're getting back to the heading that I need it to be, which is right here around 290 or 288. 288 is where I've got the um, setting. And here we are in a climb, just hand flying it and trying to I think at some point I was given a heading by my instructor, so I'm flying to that heading now, and I'm going to roll out and stop. So I no longer have that heading bug as my reference, and yeah, I think he also told me at some point to hold a certain altitude, so I'm doing that as well. I do that for a period of time, and then we put it into autopilot and we turn around and land. So let's get to the landing on single engine. So here we are hand flying the single engine down to go ahead and land. I'm a little right of center line, but I correct that. And we go ahead and just get the baby down, and down she goes. Another successful mission. My goodness, we did it. So that is the P4 test that I took and passed. I am now part of a small elite 0.1% total people that fly online at 700,000 people. If we look at the more realistic 120,000, which is people who've flown within the last 6 months, that brings me at 0.5% of pilots online have this rating. And I did enjoy the Dash. I fell in love with the Dash. I fell in love with this plane. And I can see the appeal now. I do fly the Dash for fun. I am going back into general aviation planes online, flying, my first love, and I've enjoyed that as well. I've enjoyed both. So the Dash is fun. A new model came out the next day that I've been waiting for, that the guy had been in development for years. That plane has some issues, and it has a very large frames per second hit. So much so that the plane is unflyable lots of times for me on my setup. This is a known issue with many, many, many people have issues that just didn't come out during their beta testing. Hopefully they'll get it fixed, but if not, I've enjoyed flying the Legacy. I know the quirks of it. It's not terribly different. It's not as nice, but it still does the basic same thing, which is fly on a line, um, and the systems are basically the same. It's just a couple of different little details that you notice between the $20 plane and the $80 plane. So I'm at my end for my VATSIM training with VATSTAR. And it's been a great bunch of guys. I'm still hanging around in with VATSTAR. I wish I could be an instructor. I've been offered several times to be an instructor. I just don't have the time with the farm, unfortunately. So I'm an unofficial mentor. I guess I hang around and try to help people, and yeah, so that's what I do. Maybe one day I will be able to become an instructor, but unfortunately, with the commitments of the farm, I just can't. It's hard enough just flying online as it is. So, yeah, thank you so much for watching from Dixieland Air. Take care.